These clubs stayed open when white clubs shut you out. They were church basement, lodges, juke joints stitched together into a route that booked bands, paid in cash, fed you, and even found a place for you to stay for the night. This is how the Chitlin Circuit outsmarted Jim Crow and built American music. And if you like stories like this, you can find more stories like this at onemichistory.com. I'm your host, Country Boy, but without further ado, let's get started. Jim Crow wasn't just a sign on a water fountain. It set the rules at the ticket counter, stage door, or hotel desk. Big rooms and stages were white-owned, and they booked white acts. And if a black band did get the job, they came through an alley, not the lobby. They ate in the kitchen, not the dining room. And many crowds were split shows with black people in the balcony and white people on the floor. And after the encore in sundown towns, it was a race to the next city. And this was just normal, but the touring still had to happen. So black communities built their own routes. Barbershops and beauty salons posted flyers and called in favors. Pastors opened church halls. Lodges pushed back chairs to make a dance floor. The black press, like the Chicago Defender or the Pittsburgh Courier, ran ads, reviews, and travel tips for bands. Local DJs on stations like WDIA in Memphis or WERD in Atlanta spread the word, and word of mouth did the rest. And this network started before anyone ever called it the Chitlin Circuit. In the 1910s, showmen like Sherman H. Dudley bought and linked theaters that welcomed black crowds and black performers. By the 1920s, many of these stages fed into the Theater Owners Booking Association. It was a real booking system across the South. In the Midwest, performers joked that the TOBA meant tough on black artists because the pay was low and schedules were brutal, but it kept hundreds of singers, comics, dancers, and bands on the road when white circuits shut them out. When the Great Depression hit, the TOBA folded in 1930, but the network didn't die. In Indianapolis, brothers C and Denver Ferguson ran a print shop and a cigarette vending businesses. They knew bar owners, pastors, lodge leaders, and small hall promoters across the Midwest and the South. With help from band leaders and the Chicago Defender, the Fergusons built a booking web that big agencies ignored. They mapped rooms that others overlooked. They printed thousands of handbills, and they trusted roadmen to count the doors so bands actually got paid. By the 1930s into the 1940s, that system touched tiny county joints and famous city rooms. The Apollo in Harlem, which opened to black audiences in 1934, the Regal in Chicago, the Victory Grill in Austin, and clubs on Beale Street in Memphis. Blow the roof off one of these places and your name would move extremely fast. The Defender would then print it. DJs would spin your new record. Church bulletins and lodge newsletters told folks when you were coming back. This is how promotion worked well before playlists. During the same time, 6 million black Americans left the South during the Great Migrations, and musicians traveled the same roads and rode on the same trains, carrying their sound to new cities. Travel plans were survival. The Negro Motorist Green Book, printed by Victor H. Green in 1936, listed gas stations and cafes and rooming houses that served black travelers. Pullman porters whispered updates of safe stops. Barbers and beauticians and church ladies shared fresh intel. Bands kept notes on where not to stop and reliable rooming houses. Your safe plan mattered as much as your set list. And even with the plan, the danger was very, very real. So the network adapted. The Fergusons kept sending road managers to count cash at the door, and bands packed their own microphones so they didn't have to rely on the poor house gear. Owners who shorted artists were quietly blacklisted, and drivers learned the safest routes, service stations, and rooming houses, and the goal was clear: to keep the artists safe, to keep the crowd safe, and keep money in black hands. But all of this came with the cost. Moving a 15-piece orchestra every night took buses, hotel money, union scale. During World War II, gas, tires, and parts were rationed. Smaller groups were faster and moved more cheaply. Band artists like Louis Jordan leaned on the combo of a sax, guitar, bass, drums, and Navy. a piano. They cut tunes built for jukeboxes. Between 1942 and 1951, Jordan had 18 #1 hits on the Billboard race records, later called Rhythm and Blues chart. That tight, punchy model pushed R&B and helped fuel rock and roll. Technology also mattered. Jukeboxes exploded in 1940, packing bars and cafes with coin drop music. Electric guitars and amps hit smaller bands fill an entire room, and radio stations made local hits travel. Record men watched the circuit to spot songs that moved the crowd before they moved units. Styles also mixed because stages were limited and sets ran long. One bill might jump from country blues to jazz. Performers learned to win with any room. Little Richard worked these clubs for years before cutting Tutti Frutti in 1955. James Brown and the Famous Flames started in 1956 and ran the road almost non-stop. B.B. King called his first night in Beale Street in 1947 like going to heaven. It was a training ground, and night after night, city by city, women also drove the scene on and off stage. Comics like Moms Mabley told hard truths and drew big laughs. Big Mama Thornton cut Hound Dog years before Elvis stole it. Sister Rosetta Tharpe plugging her guitar and mixed gospel with swing and shaping the sound of rock and roll. The circuit built careers, but it also built a memory of who did it first. While the circuit protected people and built careers, they could be extremely hard on them. Some owners were fair and others wrote bad contracts and pay-to-play deals. Tough on black artists had a point. Don Roby, for example, was famous for making hits and also famous for his sketchy business tactics. Pay could be steady but not rich. The nights were long, the road was dangerous, the threat was very, very real. Then came 1960s and the map changed. Court wins like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 opened more doors for mainstream venues, and integrated rooms booked more black acts, and that was progress. It pulled crowds and dollars into black theaters and clubs. At the same time, urban renewal and highway building projects cut out the heart of many business districts. Federal programs under the 1949 Housing Act and 1956 Interstate Highway Act ran big roads straight through places like Beale Street in Memphis, Black Bottom in Detroit, Treme in New Orleans, and James Baldwin famously called it Negro removal. When neighborhoods fell, many small rooms fell with them. By the 1970s, big labels and national promoters controlled more of touring, and the old web of the Chitlin Circuit thinned. But where did the phrase Chitlin Circuit come from? The phrase Chitlin Circuit didn't hit print until the 1970s. One of the earliest use was in the 1972 Chicago Defender piece about a hard driving soul and R&B touring like Ike and Tina Turner. But the name was also a wink. People were already used to calling the Catskills resort route for Jewish performers the Borscht Belt. In the 1940s to 1960s, the Chitlin Circuit echoed that idea for black performers and linked a network of safe stages built because segregation and exclusion kept them out of white-owned venues. Those two communities, two fools, the same workaround to make a stage when others wouldn't let you in. And this connection to chitlins wasn't just a metaphor. The cleaning, the boiled intestines of a pig were a soul food staple built out of scarcity and turned into a tradition. Some venues on the Chitlin Circuit would even serve them, and some of the artists got paid in meals when the cash ran thin. Chitlins already singing the music long before the label existed. So the name carries two truths. It nods to another exclusionary circuit, and it also honors a food that turns scraps into a feast. And you make a stage with whatever you have. This is the spirit behind the Chitlin Circuit. Thank you. I'm your host, Country Boy. This has been the story of the Chitlin Circuit. If you like stories like this, you can find more stories like this at onemichistory.com. I'd like to thank all my financial contributors. Without you, none of this could be possible. I love you all. Thank you for your support. Peace.